The following recording is a special speakers meeting in celebration of SA Sobriety, recorded on Zoom in February of 2023. This YouTube channel is not affiliated in any way with Sexaholics Anonymous. For more information, you can visit sa.org. I would like to introduce Dove G, who celebrated 26 years of sexual sobriety this week. Congratulations, Dove. And just to make you feel really comfortable and happy, I'm going to ask everyone, if they're willing, if we can sing one round of Happy Birthday to Dove. All right, you ready? Happy birthday to Dove. Happy birthday to Dove. Happy birthday to Dove. Happy birthday to you. All right. And if we were face to face, we'd give you a cake, Dove, with 26 candles. And without further ado, I pass it to you. I'm going to mute the line. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. I want to start on a happy note. So I want to thank you because I got a note from some guy today. He said, thank you. You're such an inspiration, blah, blah, blah. And we are an inspiration to each other. Of course, we're an inspiration to each other. But he doesn't realize how much of an inspiration he is to me, because I just see him coming back and I realize he's taking his life seriously. And I know what some of his problems are. And if he's taking his life seriously and not giving up on himself, it's really dumb for me to give up on myself. And that means a lot to me, because I have ups and downs. And in my imagination, in between these ears, behind these eyes, what these eyes have seen, and behind the things that this head has planned, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of pain, embarrassment, shame. And I don't have to access that stuff. That's sort of like, I went to the bathroom, I flushed the toilet. I don't have to go say, oh, where did that stuff go? Let me find it. And like, where did it go? You know, it's okay. It's okay. These are the building blocks that made me. Some of this pain made me. So the person I am today, for good, I'm saying. I count my sobriety date from February 28th, 1997. Because that was the day that I think I hit bottom. So far, it seems that way. So I was talking with my wife once, and she said to me something like, she's not typically interested in this, but she said to me like, oh, so what's your sobriety date? Because the first like 5 years or 10 years in, she said to me something, I said to her, oh, it's my sobriety today, you know? And she says to me, so you didn't blow your brains out for another day. You celebrate that? Like, you know, so she didn't get it. But now she appreciates it. Not the date at all, really. Just the concept of it. The fact that I'm a person she can live with now is really good. But anyway, getting back to my point. So I told her it's February 28th, and she said, oh, so the last day that you acted out was February 27th? And I said to her, no, the last day I acted out was February 28th. And so far. And she says to me, so then your sobriety, it's a lie. Your sobriety date is the next day. So I was going to say to her, I can't do that because it was February 29th that year, which would mean that I'm only 2 years sober now or something. But I didn't say that. I said to her, because the reason that I'm sober, the only reason that I'm sober is because I acted out enough. It was that day that got me sober. It was my acting out that got me sober. And that's something it's hard to understand except for an addict. If somebody's going to join, I'm not an OA. I can't speak for OA, but I imagine that somebody in OA isn't going to join OA because they didn't have an eating problem. You know what I'm saying? They had to realize like, oh crap, this is crazy, and that realization doesn't come after we quit. After we quit, after we get high, after we act out, we're all geniuses. It's when we act out and hit bottom, when I'm acting out, that's when I could be a genius really easy right after I act out. After I act out, I'm wholly religious. I'm a great father. I'm a great husband. I'm all kinds of great things after I act out. The only way we knew to be free of it was to do it. That doesn't take much. But hitting bottom means that time I'm acting out and I'm going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I can't believe it. And it's not working. And I'm done digging, I'm done digging. And knowing that, at least that was my experience. Look, Bill shares his experience in the thing. And I don't remember, I read Roy's story in the beginning like twice, maybe, but I don't remember like his bottom. I think he says, I get sick and tired of being sick and tired. I don't know what that means exactly, but I was sick and tired that day. And that's probably why I came to program. I know that's why I finally went to a shrink and told the person everything, instead of before, when I never really gave anybody a fair shake. And when I accepted the truth about myself, that I can't successfully control this stuff at all, and the game's over. So anyway, so that's just something cool about sobriety dates. There was something else I wanted to share. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, the loneliness was crazy. I don't say that. I don't know why I said it like that just now. The loneliness is crazy. When I act out, the loneliness is crazy. When I act out, it very quickly becomes the most important thing in my life. Even if it's just a pastime, if it was just a pastime 5 minutes ago, it was just a way to fill my boredom 5 minutes ago. But when I engage in porn, touching myself, fantasizing, when I engage in that stuff, which I don't do, but when I engage in now, thank God today, but when I engage in that stuff, I know what happens to me is my brain chemistry, something changes immediately. It flips around, and I could be sober as a dead man one moment. And when I use that stuff, when I engage in erotic adventure, I change, and it becomes the most important thing in my life. Everything's up for grabs. Everything else is up for grabs when I start, grabbing that stuff. So that's incredible. And to realize that, to me, is where that's my powerlessness. To realize, wow, I can't go there. And it's not a warning, from the Bible or something, like I think if I were I don't know what prophecy's like either, but I imagine if I were a prophet and God spoke to me and said, you're powerless over lust, it wouldn't mean a damn thing to me. The only thing that would mean anything to me is my experience. In other words, I have to prove that to myself. You have to prove that to yourself too, I bet. I don't think anybody can prove that to us. I've heard about raising bottoms. I don't know. I'm not sure if that, what that means, but if it gets proven to me somehow, then I can be a free man. And that's the only reason I'm a free person today, is because I have a first step. I'm not sober and free today because I have a fourth step, a ninth step, an 11th step, a proper relationship with God. All that stuff is what recovery and sobriety and real living are about. That's the fruit of recovery. But the reason that I'm sober and not acting out is because I can't afford to act out. It's so I relate to the lowest sexaholic and drunk when I drive by somebody laying in the street. And here in Baltimore, we call it the Baltimore lean. Somebody who's on heroin so high that they're just standing there and defying gravity for 10 minutes. It's like, As long as I'm at a red light, there they are leaning over, and the angle is impossible. It's like this guy has to be falling on his face now, but he's not. And there's people who video this apparently. So in Philadelphia, it's probably bigger because that's like the new heroin capital, I understand. But God forbid, here it's fentanyl now, and people just die. But but when I act out and I'm high in my stuff, there's like a flashing light, and that's the hold button. Back in the old days, you hit the hold button, and there's like a little light flashing on the phone, and that light flashing is marrying off my kids, making dinner tonight, having sex with my wife, going to school, going to worship, putting my kids to bed, waking up my kids, going to sleep, going to whatever I'm doing is all. It's like the acting out is on hold, and I'm doing all that stuff so that when it's over, I can finally go back to the acting out. And that's where my brain is. That's where my focus is. It's like if there were a pie chart. Um, when I'm acting out, some certain percentage is like real life, and then the rest of the pie is when am I going to get back to whatever I was trying to get to do before and continue. And I don't live like that anymore. You know, I don't live like that anymore. When I'm here, I'm here. And when I just came from a Tai Chi class. Tai Chi is something old people do. So, you know, I used to do karate. Now I'm too old. I do Tai Chi. So I'm sitting in this Tai Chi class and I'm thinking, and Shim asked me yesterday, "Hey, would you be able to share at a meeting?" And I go, "Yeah, maybe I should have said no. I don't know. I said, yeah, I thought like, oh, I'm doing the guy a favor. There's probably a bunch of sexaholics who need something. Okay, good. That sounds cool. 10:30, I could do, yeah. And then he goes, okay, good. And then he lays this, medallion thing on me. It's like, thanks, Jim. You know, I hope I get you back at your 26th anniversary. I don't know. It doesn't matter numbers, but I hope I get you back some way. Yeah, the numbers don't matter. I just buried my mother 3 weeks ago, yesterday. No, yeah, yesterday. So my birth mother, I was adopted. My birth mother, who I have a great relationship with, and who introduced me to Tai Chi because she does that, because she's older than I am, and old people do Tai Chi. Um, she's been doing Tai Chi for 30 years or something like that. Um, just so happens I started that because of her. I want to have a connection with her, another connection with her. But my mother, who raised me, um, she was in our house for 7.5 years and really put the kibosh on like family time and vacation and all that other stuff for us. And whatever normalcy we were expecting, life was very different. And life is really different now that she's not here anymore. Um, yeah. Why do I mention that? Because a 19-year-old girl was knocked up, excuse me. It's not nice to say it that way, but I think that's kind of what it ended up being, even though she didn't realize it, by a guy who had my birth father, who my wife calls my sperm donor, um, by an artist who had a string of women, you know, for I don't know how many years of his life. Um, she didn't even know that she was part of a string of relationships. She found out after he died and saw his Wikipedia page. She didn't know. And she gave birth to me. Um, uh, and 10 days later, she let me go because she couldn't. she knew she couldn't raise me, it seemed, and the people were pushing her and all that other stuff, and her family and whatever. And I got taken in 3 months later by a woman who worked in Auschwitz for a year and a half, and a man who was a slave laborer for 3 years under the Nazis. All their families were, both of their families, practically all of them, about 50 people on each side were gassed during World War II. And here this couple survived, and they decide to come to America, and they couldn't have kids. And they decided to adopt. And they adopted, and there I was. I got picked, you know. And the life that I have, now, all the good in my life that I have now is from my mother and father. My body and my genetics and my attitudes, maybe some of them are from my birth father and my birth mother. Thankfully, a lot more from my birth mother, apparently, except my addiction somehow slipped through. His mother, my birth father's mother and father, and my birth father himself all went to AA, but it didn't work for them, whatever that means. They couldn't get sober. And he was drunk a lot, really bad drinking, and kind of died that way. My birth mother's father also. Yeah. But probably good people in some way. Look around the rooms, you'll meet a lot of good people. I want to share something crazy that happened. My son, I have to watch out. I could go on for 15 hours, which wouldn't be fair, but my son was really hard to handle for us. And I went to a therapist after a while because I was like 4 years sober and struggling in sobriety. And when someone says, when I say struggling, I know what I mean is, I can't speak for you. I'm trying to figure out how to include acting out in my life somehow. I'm bargaining because sobriety, I don't know what it is for Al-Anons. I imagine it's similar, but for S-Anons, whatever. But for addicts, it's a mourning process with a U. And there's like denial, that lasted for 20 years for me, that I could really control this. And then there's somewhere in there's anger. And I know these stages aren't accepted anymore as like the gold standard for how things work in grieving and loss and mourning. And but they're a good model. There's bargaining and acceptance, and maybe there's some other stage in there. It doesn't matter. But that bargaining is, I alternated between bargaining and anger for the first 5 years, and for 4 years of my sobriety. I was a holy terror at home. I was horrible. I was impossible to live with, because getting sober makes you feel better. It makes you better at feeling. And I sure as hell didn't feel any better most of the time. And I was scared. I was terrified that I would go back to being the man that I used to be. And I was also afraid all the time that I still am the man I used to be, and someone's going to figure it out. And I didn't listen to that fear and give up. And that's why I'm here today, living a good life, by the way, among other things. Anyway, where the hell was I? So I went to a shrink to get a better relationship with my son, because something was going on. My wife didn't want me to go to therapists. She had it up to here with therapists by then, because I had been to 4 when I was acting out. Didn't tell her why. I told her it was depression and anxiety, which is a good lie. It was not like a lie. It was kind of true. But anyway, I meet so many people who go to therapists for anxiety and depression. And then they come to me I get calls from certain organizations, and they tell me that they're acting out sexually. They need to stop. And I say, how long have you been doing this? For 25 years, 15 years. It goes, have you ever been to a therapist before? Because they often sound a little something's not 100%. And sure enough, they went to therapists for anxiety, depression before. I said, okay. And did you bring this up? And they said, no. Why? And I said, well, okay, let's see. List me 10 things that you're anxious about. And they list 10 things. And I say, give me the top five. And they give me the top five. The acting out is always in there. Then I say, give me the top two. And the acting out is always in there. And I say, give me the top one. And they say, and sometimes the acting out is on top. Sometimes something else, like public speaking, is like the second one. I don't know, and or death or something, or whatever. And I say, okay, so this is the one of the top two things that you're anxious and depressed about, and you didn't mention that to your therapist, when you went for anxiety, depression, because you thought it only had to do with sex. Like that doesn't make sense. Anyway, but that's the way that we think. So anyway, I went to a shrink, and the shrink was this wise human being, and she says to me, you can tell a male sexaholic typically says a person when they mean a woman. All right, anyway, so she was really wise, and she says, your wife and you are being played by your son like a violin, like violins. He knows how to play each of you according to your weaknesses. Call your wife in here. And my wife agreed. She came in, and the shrink talks to both of us, and she explains how this whole thing works and everything. And we agreed. It was like obvious. Like, yeah, he's a good kid, but he wants to be in charge and be the parent. And when a kid becomes a parent, their whole life is a mess because they can't be. They just don't like realize that. They think if only I could be free, then everybody would leave me alone, then I'd be fine. Does that sound familiar to any of us? If only I could just act out, and society and my spouse wouldn't care anymore, and they wouldn't judge me so much. I'd finally work this out, and I'd get it. You know. Anyway, that's the bargaining again. Um, so 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 we both agree to do whatever she says because we saw she's right, and the power greater than ourselves. And she said, you two have to go on walks and discuss every single situation you get into with your boy that you get into arguments about or that you don't know what to do about, and agree on what you're going to do. And that's what we did. And we started going on these walks, and I, of course, was terrified because I was afraid she'd figure out that I was a complete idiot and had nothing to say. And she didn't. Instead, like, I had things to say, and I had opinions and things. And we shared, and we started to agree on things that were important, like what to do with our son the next time he does X, Y, and Z. And that started a pattern of walking and talking and agreeing on things and connecting. And in his white book that we went for the connection, the chemistry, and the connection that had the magic, because, and that's italicized over there. It's italicized, if I'm not mistaken, because it bypassed intimacy and true union. So in other words, I find this, I know this is a tangent, but I find this in people who want to work on self-esteem, and they talk about self-esteem and they want to start to love themselves. And I think to myself, my sponsor would tell me, if you're having a hard time with a step, look at the step before. So going from hating oneself to loving oneself doesn't really make any sense. But people who hate themselves are very, very attracted to people who say to them, you have to love yourself. I'll help you learn how to love yourself. The next thing you know, half of them are having sex with them or something. Who knows? But so it's like, no, it doesn't work that way, I think. To me, it seems like the solution is accepting oneself first, which is really step 4 and 5 and 6 are about accepting ourselves. It doesn't have anything to do with liking ourselves at all. So, yeah, and I don't remember the program saying anything about loving God really in the steps, but accepting God, definitely. And that changes everything. Different relationships. So So before I could love my wife, I had to know my wife. I had to accept my wife. And before I could do that, I really had to accept myself. For the first 10 years of our marriage, I had at least 2 panic attacks, which suck. And some of you know, unfortunately, exactly what panic attacks are. Horrible. Because I was afraid that I married the wrong woman. In fact, people don't have panic attacks because they're afraid. People have panic attacks because they're sure. They feel sure. It's an oh poop moment, you know? And see, I'm trying to be good on this talk. So, uh, yeah. And then over first 10 years of sobriety, I started to realize that this woman's okay for me. And by around 10 years, I stopped feeling afraid that I married the wrong woman, which was a terrible feeling. And I started to see how we're good for each other. And since then, it's become more and more clear to me that I don't know what made for each other means, but we're damn good for each other, you know? And that's connected to what I started saying. This isn't a lost tangent, believe it or not. So we started talking and connecting, the connection without the magic, just the connection, the intimacy, being revealing about the truth in myself and what I thought, and being able to disagree. That took a long, long time without it being a tragedy and me having to go masturbate over it, you know, that which was the normal way. It was always tragic when she didn't love me. By the way, the reason that it was so tragic, I wrote this down. It's the only thing I wrote to prepare for this talk. The reason that it was so tragic, I think, for her to disagree with me or anything like that, or to suspect me, or of course to find out about my acting out, besides that it would jeopardize my freedom to do it, which was a big part of it. But besides that, it was because I think the loneliness that I had acting out for so many years was so painful and so horrible. It wasn't just bad. It was hell. It was like my mother said to me many times, Aleha Hashalom. That means of blessed memory. Sort of. So I'm sorry. She said, she would say to me, talking about Holocaust stuff, which she stopped talking about in her last like 2 years because of dementia. She would say, I was in hell by life, you know, in Auschwitz. People were dying, you know, chimneys were running and whatever. She says, I was in hell by life. And I remember from the first time I was in program that I heard her say that, I didn't say, yeah, I know what you mean. But I thought to myself, yeah, I got my own hell. You know, maybe it wasn't like hers, but it was hell. And I was terrified that my wife wouldn't adore me. You know, the extreme thing again. Self-hatred, self-love is the only answer. BS. But that's the way that I felt. I was sure she had to adore me. Sex had to be incredible. Sex had to be incredible, and it had to be whenever I wanted it, and I couldn't be rejected or delayed because that would mean she didn't really want me. Oh man, how horrible. Because I had spent so many years hiding and being alone and being like one man with all my religious friends and family people. And I remember walking downstairs after masturbating up in the bed in my bathroom and reading a dirty book that I was hiding because, you know, whatever. And then coming down to dinner when I was a kid and seeing my family of, you know, my sister and my parents, who was also adopted, my sister, but sitting there at dinner, and I felt this fugue, you know, like I'm walking into a different reality now. I was in a different universe a minute ago, the universe of fantasy where everything's fine. And she wants me and she loves me, and I'm the guy in the story or in the porn. Anyhow, that's loneliness. That's an incredible, relentless loneliness. And when I got married, and if I had like my birth father, probably strings of like relationships, like maybe love addicts do. I don't know. I'm not a love addict. I don't know, but maybe that's what they're experiencing too. I don't know. it's like the only answer. It's like, connect with me and make me whole, we cried with outstretched arms. He should have written, we begged with outstretched arms. I was always begging. I was the poorest man on the block, you know. My wife's grandfather, who was the first grandfather that I ever had, because all of my other grandfathers were dead, when I grew up not knowing that old people belong in a family at all. But anyway, because they were all, dead, but killed, but my wife's grandfather dressed in kind of shabby clothes. I don't know why. And once a panhandler came over to him in downtown Baltimore and asked him for money. And my wife's grandfather said to him, hey, this is my side of the street. Like, I'm working this side of the street. And the guy goes, oh, sorry. And went to the other side of the street. Like, I could have done that. That's how I walked around. If I would see somebody, depressed, I'm like, yeah, I got that. Worse than you, whatever, go screw yourself. I'm also depressed, if somebody was like drunk laying in the street in their vomit, I'm like, yeah, I'm laying in the street, but I'm not sitting in vomit. I'm in a different body fluid or something. It's like, and I'm acting out in places where the floors are sticky. Do you know how humiliating that is? Anyway, getting back to the story. And I'll finish up because there's people wanted to do some Q&A or something like that. So the connection, the desperation for the connection, and even the slightest rejection. Oh, you're not incredibly excited with me. You don't want me crazy, like crazy all the time. Masturbation's sex on demand. That's why it works. Porn is on demand. It's all the porn I ever watched was predictable. For some reason, they all have the same ending. I'm not sure why, but anyway, same writer, I guess. And that was a sure thing. And that's what I needed, a sure thing. And in real life, there's no sure thing if I make up what the outcome is supposed to be. So step 3 is all the outcomes are in God's hands. All of the outcomes are in God's hands. None of them are in my hands. In my hand is all the responsibility to try and be me and do me, do life, live life on God's terms. In other words, on reality's terms, and connect to reality. If I do that, things are going to be okay. So for self-esteem, what I needed was not to feel better about myself. I needed to stop making up crazy assumptions of how I'm supposed to be. And as soon as I did that, the fog started to lift. So that's the idea of like looking for the people who try to convince me that I'm awesome. It's like you're trying to give me the connection that has the magic because you don't want to give me intimacy with myself. Show me how to be intimate with myself, not masturbating. Show me how to be intimate with myself through knowing myself. How do you do that? Write on paper 4 columns. Do a 4th step on paper. No checklists. I'm not gonna whine about that, but I gotta accept myself as I really am. So there's no shame in this program. It's all gone because I accept myself. The answer to shame isn't looking past it and starting to feel good about myself. To me, the answer to shame is accepting the truth. That's why when I introduce myself in every meeting, I say, hi, I'm Dov, I'm a sexaholic. When I act out, I use porn, phone sex, masturbate myself, cruise, go to nude bars, massage parlors, expose myself, and make sex the most important thing in my life and ruin it, because that's how you ruin sex in a marriage, at least. Just like alcoholism ruins ruins an alcoholic's drinking. And that's who I am. And I'm sober one day at a time since February 28th, 1997. How long is that? I don't care. As long as I'm not acting out today, So just to finish that story. So my wife and I on these walks, and this is the last thing I'll say, and we'll go to the Q&A things, because it's just crazy. My wife and I are on these walks, and a conversation comes up about people acting out, not anybody in particular. And my wife says to me, this is 20 years ago. Excuse me. And my wife says to me, people, if you had sex with a prostitute or somebody, I couldn't stay married to you. And I said, oh, okay. Hmm. Okay. Just so happens I haven't had sex with a prostitute, with anybody else. I mean, I had hand jobs. Excuse me for being explicit, but that was it. But in my own case, fine. But I just have to be clear. I mean, I don't want to give explicit stuff, but I have to be clear and honest. So I have to at least be able to say that. You know what I'm saying? Because I can't just say I trust me. I acted out a lot. That's not going to work. So at least for me. So 5 years later, my wife and I are going on another one of these walks, and she says to me, you know, if you, and she didn't remember the first conversation at all. And she says, if you had sex with prostitutes and things and affairs with other people, um, I think I wouldn't divorce you. And I don't understand why they're divorcing their sexaholic husbands. If you got children, you got to stay together for the kids. And I said, oh, well, that's good. And then she goes, but I'd never have sex with you again. And I'm like, oh, crap. It was looking good for a second there. Okay. 5 years, I'm not kidding you. About 5 years goes on. And she says to me in another one of these conversations, I can't understand these couples that break up and like throw their marriage out because the husband, was a sexaholic and did these things and had sex with another person and stuff, because they really need to work on their marriages, and save it and stuff. And I said, would you be able to ever, make love with me again? And she said, yeah, I would. It would take me a while, but yeah, why not? Okay. Last part. 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we were talking. We were very close. It was around the time my mother passed away. And we were talking um, in a private place. And we were talking about it. And we weren't being sexual, but we were talking about it. And she says to me, I feel, she made a confession to me about, she had said something to a guy that she felt was inappropriate, too mushy, and I said to her, I'm okay. I've done worse. It's okay. And she said, no, I feel really bad about it. It was inappropriate. It looked really like inappropriate. And I said, trust me, I've done worse. You know what I've done? I've done worse. I've gotten naked with people. Yeah, I told you what people means. So she says, what are you talking about? And I said, my whole story, because when I came home from a recovery weekend once, I was 12 years sober. I had done an expose on myself. I told my whole story to them, and my wife says, you told the whole crowd everything you've done? And I said, yeah. And she said, so they know a lot more than I do? And I said, well, you didn't want to know more, you told me. And she said, yeah, but now I do. I don't want them to know more than I do. So tell me everything. And I sat down, I told her for an hour. I told her all this horrible drunkalogue, for the first time. And we were much closer after that, actually. But I was 12, 13 years sober. Anyway, so she knew everything that I did when I was acting out. She knew everything I do when I act out, but she doesn't see it that way. When I was acting out. And I said, yeah, so I've done worse than you. And she said, no, but you were sick. I'm not sick. And what I did was wrong. And what you did was wrong actions, but you were sick. So you know, and I thought to myself, why would I hate you because of that? And I thought to myself, what the hell has changed over these years? What's changed over these years? She hasn't been going to therapy. She hasn't been in S-Anon. She hasn't done any of these things. But I've changed, obviously. I've been working a program. And I guess that our dynamic has changed. And somehow these things, the definitions of things and the meanings of things have changed for her somehow. That to me, that's incredible. And I'm going to stop there. Thanks for letting me share.
Hi, my name is Sexaholic. So thank you, Dove, so much. I just have an interesting question. Um, I've been a lot of times to celebrations, and what I appreciate hearing from people with like multiple years sobriety, sometimes double-digit sobriety, as they call it, to share like like the milestones of what they learned in recovery that year, and like what was their like major aha moment in life in that year. If you're able to expand on that, thanks.
I wanna limit that. And by the way, if there's an echo in my voice in the recording, let me know at some time. Just interrupt me. I spoke about a few of those milestones in the share. But I want to just throw in a couple more. Religion, for me, was a lot of things. But when I think that unfortunately, religion became a way for me to escape from myself very early on, I believe. And when I found the porn god, goddess, whatever, it became clear to me that I had two competing higher powers. A power greater than myself that restored me to insanity, and a power greater than myself that restored me to forgetting about myself, which was God at that time. And the one that restored me to insanity was the higher power that restored me to insanity was erotic adventure. Because lust doesn't mean desire. In our program, it's clear. Lust doesn't mean desire in our program. Lust means engaging in erotic adventure. Because everybody has desire, and I'm always going to have desires, and that doesn't even matter. It's not even a blip on my radar, you know? It doesn't deserve to be. Everybody has desires. That's not the problem. Religious people make it into a problem, and then it becomes a monster. But that's not, you know. Anyway, but the religion served a different purpose for me. And then when porn started to serve that purpose better, that became my new religion, really. And in early recovery, religiosity, which is important to me, and my culture and my family, was very confusing and very difficult. And that took about 3 or 4 years to change. And then when it did, around 10 years in is when in sobriety and working program, and I didn't really work the program that great in the beginning. I really started to work it more seriously around year 6 or 7, I think, noticeably. Because I had to, because I couldn't stay sober without it, which is the natural way to do this, I think. Not that I wasn't working program at all before. I was going to meetings and doing service and working steps, but it wasn't what it needed to be.
Around 10 years in is when I started to settle, and my family relationships and my religion were starting to become more integrated in me and them, and more real. And so I think we just need to be very patient with ourselves about a lot of milestones, because what'll happen to you at 2 years will happen to someone else at 10 years. And when we're hoping for things, it messes things up, and the outcomes need to be in God's hands. So that's all I want to talk about, milestones.
Hi, Dr. Sexaholic. I really wanted to just take this opportunity to publicly thank you, Dove, for everything that you do for the SA community. And I feel so incredibly humble and grateful to be a little blip on the screen in your recovery journey. So thank you so much for everything you give, and keep coming back, because we need people like you. Thanks for letting me share.
Thanks for sharing.
I I have to comment on that. Thank you very much. I was doing Tai Chi this morning, and the Tai Chi instructor, I've been working a month, 6 lessons so far, I think, on one sequence of movements, maybe whatever, one sequence of movements. And I think I'm getting it pretty good now. I think I'm getting it. And he says to me, don't worry, it might take a while, but we're going to do the next 85 movements. You know what I'm saying? And I'm thinking, 85 movements. And that part of me that's like, oh crap, this is going to take like 5 years, spoke up. But that's an old, dusty part of me now. The part of me that came out to the front was, and I didn't say it to him, but I wanted to because it was an interruption because he kept on yabbering, was, you know what, Lou, that's his name. You know what, Lou? If all I end up doing is this one sequence of movements, I'm okay. I'm okay. It's okay. Because the difference between me doing it now and doing it 2 weeks ago or even a week ago is incredible. There's so much in here. I imagine that if we did this one sequence for the next year, I would find so much in this. It's fine. Maybe the next 5 years, maybe the rest of my life. Maybe I don't need any more Tai Chi, but this one move. It's okay. And when you say that you're a blip on the screen in my recovery, I think to myself, if I help one sexaholic family, that's enough for me. Do I want to retire? No, but it's enough. It's enough. And by the way, I had that same feeling regarding sex, that like it's enough. I'm not a beggar anymore with my wife. I'm just not. And I might not remember that if a month goes by and there's no sex. I might suddenly forget. I don't know. But I'm starting to feel like, oh, it's enough. It's okay. It's okay. And periods of abstinence help for that because, we don't drop dead, which is amazing, and all that. But yeah, but I mean, if you'd be the only, I don't even want to use the word blip, but I'm not criticizing what you said at all. But if you'd be the only person, that's fine with me. That's fine with me. No complaints. Anybody else?
I really appreciated what you said about going on walks with wife and discovering you really had ideas and then discussing together, which is something my husband and I have done more and more of in recovery. It's something I had given up on ever, like having a good relationship with my husband. I thought that was above what I should expect of my recovery. I'm like, okay, I'm sober. This is as good as it gets. And if that's as good as it gets, that's okay. But we both have been working on the relationship. One thing which still bothers me, and I'm wondering if I'm being nitpicky because other problems have been solved and now I'm finding something else to nitpick, which is I don't feel I get complimented enough. I know how that sounds, but this is one place where I don't, and I feel like when he does do it, it feels great. He's very direct. He's very specific, and I like that. And he does notice, but it's just as you said, it's not as often as I want, when I want, etc. So for me, that delay kind of almost makes me feel resentful and not appreciated. So have you had any similar feelings, and do you just wait it out and grow out of it, or how do you grow out of it? Thank you.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of like what I said before. If my wife isn't acting in a way that I interpret as like I'm the most amazing, wonderful person in the world for her, completely, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't even know what words to use. Then it's like tragic, and then that kind of like gets ratcheted down more to realistic. And it sounds to me like you are in a very, very realistic place, extremely realistic place. And there's this little tweak, that you're noticing. It's like, ooh, that, like, I got an itch, you know what I'm saying? And you're noticing it, like, and it's real. And I just want to say that I don't know your husband, but I'm horrible at complimenting people. It's not natural for me to. I'm getting better at it, but it's horrible. Um, it doesn't come natural for me. I'm really not good at it. I need to work on that. And I think that, we get more flies with honey than with vinegar. I think that my perspective, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, is to compliment people, if they do that, and let them know. And it's kind of ironic or funny because it's about complimenting, but like to compliment people when they do something that I like and say, I really like the way you did that. That means so much to me, and maybe say to them, when I heard you say blah, blah, nah, nah, it really meant so much to me, thank you. And that will teach them. Look, we're not training dogs, but we need to give positive reinforcement to people. Otherwise, they just don't have a clue. It's not fair. So that's all I can say on that. I hope it's helpful. Good luck.
Thank you.
Hi, Dove. Good to see you. Thank you for the message, for the service. I was wondering if you would share how many, I would say, hours a day you put into recovery, and if you believe you would stay sober with working it, not putting in as many hours.
Okay.
They say it takes many hours to get sober and stay sober. And I know for myself, when I cut it down to a certain point, I believe I started struggling.
Okay, so I'll tell you, I'll answer this very directly with God's help, because I'll need it. The hours that I put into my recovery happen mainly when I'm laying in bed and I'm thinking to myself, crap, my wife's asleep and I'm in the mood to do this. And I could say to myself, let me just think about how nice it would be. And I don't do that. Instead, I pick up a book and I read until I feel tired and go to sleep. I'm not talking about resisting temptation. I'm talking about choosing to not fantasize because that's really where the resentment comes from, and comes from the fantasy to me. And when I have a resentment, choosing not to like sit in the resentment. When I'm on my way to work and I'm late and I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to tell the person that there was traffic. Yeah, but I left 10 minutes late and there is traffic, so it won't be a lie. And I realize like, I can't do that. That's lying. I have to come up with something else, like, sorry, I'm late, or something like that, and my recovery comes when I go through the day. These are the hours that I put into recovery. When I go through the day and I want to do something not sober, not recovery oriented, in other words, not honest or whatever, and I don't do that because the book says this. My step work, when I wrote my fourth step out, this came out in a conversation I had with this. And when I listened to Chuck C's New Pair of Glasses, he said this and it got in me. And I just can't manage to have this like backdrop and then behave this way. It's just doesn't match. And I got to have it match. I have to live right. And that's most of my recovery work. I'm not playing games. I'm just being straightforward and honest with you. I go to one meeting a week. Generally, I've gone to one meeting a week for 26 years so far. There was a short time that I went to more meetings a week, and it ended up not helping me, actually. Now, I think at that time, it was good for a time. But then it became, when I started tasting how much approval I get going to 3 meetings a week, I started wanting to go to 4 meetings a week. And it didn't even occur to me that 3 of the 4 meetings were during putting the kids to bedtime at home. And my sponsor, my Jeff, my old sponsor, who didn't have any kids, still gave it to me. And he said, what are you doing going to so many meetings when it's putting kids to bedtime? You're messing your family time. How are you going to work your program if you're not with your family? And I started going to like a morning and a noon meeting and stuff, and then an AA meeting and stuff. So, but all through the whole thing, it's been one home group and getting honest in that home group and doing service in that home group. And does that mean that people shouldn't go to 2 meetings a week? No, I personally tell people who ask me how many meetings a week should I go to, and they're kind of new. I say, start with 2 meetings a week, maybe 3. And I don't spend that much time reading. I carry around the 12 and 12 because I live and breathe. This is my food. Used to carry around AA pocket thing too. Same story. Do I sit and read an hour a day, 10 minutes a day? No, I never did. But I have time on the phone with my sponsor, and I look in the book, a few times a week, and I read because it's really good for me. I think the focus of most people is like, you have to do 12 meditations and 13 acceptances a day and 4 prayers, and then be on your knees for 5 minutes. And the first thing you hit has to be your knees on the floor. And it's like, when I was burying my mom, I had to go on my knees a number of times, but I didn't do it with people around because I'm a Jew, and Jews don't like do that so much publicly anymore. We stopped doing that in the Middle Ages because of living in Muslim lands, and that's how they prayed all the time, and it became a Jewish not thing to practice. Really, that was the real source of that. But it's like not. But I have to do that because for me that's helpful. But I do it privately, and it's a biblical thing, and it means a lot to me. And that's and I say the 3rd step prayer, and I have my own version of the 3rd step prayer that I say, and everybody should probably develop their own version of the 3rd step prayer. And I mean, my God, I offer myself to you, etc., to thee, whatever. I have my own way of saying it, and it means, and I do these things, but these things are like religious practice, and I'm trying to get away from it, and I'm trying to say, well, you might need some customs and things and meetings and stuff, but the main thing is, am I practicing it in my real life? Am I putting this stuff to practice in my real life? And do I look for opportunities to practice it in my real life? When guys call me, I don't feel like I'm doing step 12. I feel like, I don't know what step this is, but this person needs help. No? So I guess if you want to include that stuff in my step work, it's hard for me to say that it's my step work because I don't know how much time I'm going to spend. I don't really have a specific time that I do and take calls during that time. And, but instead it's the other way around. I'll help and take calls until I can't stand it anymore, until it's problematic, until, no, this is getting in the way of my family time. And this is too much, and then I'll put a limit on it. I talk to people probably I probably talk to people 3 hours a day, or record. Yes, it's probably 3 hours a day of that. I honestly believe most people don't need to talk to a single newcomer to get to have recovery. I think you need to live your life and apply the principles of the steps in your life as it is, and how it comes out is how it'll come out. This is how it came out for me. And I believe, because I'm a fanatic, I believe that maybe God has arranged this to make up for my phone sex that I was doing 50 million hours a day, probably at least 3 hours a day of phone sex. Maybe that makes up for it. But I promise you that if for 1 second I had thought to myself, I did a hell of a lot of phone sex, I'm going to incorporate phone outreach in my recovery plan, that would have destroyed my whole recovery, because I would have been playing God. I had to just live things as they come and And this is just the way it turned out. Hope that makes sense.
Dove, thanks for being you. My question is two parts, nothing to do related with each other. One is, every time I come into meetings after having thousands of multiple relapses, I feel a lot of noise when I check in my sobriety date. I would like to know how I would deal with that. And the second question is, I share very, very honestly when I'm in meetings, but I get a tremendous high from it. So how do I deal with that?
Okay, so you're going to think I'm nitpicking, but you haven't had thousands of relapses. You've had like 14, maybe 30. If you actually wrote them down, I think the number would be disappointingly low. And it would also be surprisingly high. In other words, getting the reality factor is what is sort of like pouring water on a fire. We don't need a fire in our recovery. We don't need fire. We don't need motivational things and excitement, highs at all. I'm not saying not to be high at all. I'm just saying I don't need that for my recovery. And I don't need to fire up my recovery and drive myself with a whip of like, oh my God, I'm so messed up, you know? So any kind of superlative, like I've had 1,000,000 relapses, 1,000 relapses. It's like, you know what? I do that frequently. See that I didn't say all the time. That's part of learning how to do this. I have to practice this. I don't have to. If I want to get better at this, I have to practice this. I'm not going to get better without practicing it. And I don't do it all the time, but I do it frequently. And this is all part of that killing. It's like pouring water on that excited part of ourselves that we kind of like because it's nice sometimes, but it also screws our heads up because we think that we're worse than we are. We get high in the meeting and we think that there's a reason to get high. And guess what? Whatever I shared in the meeting, 90% of the people are going to forget about it after the meeting. Maybe 100%. And that's okay. You know, so before that would be like an insult, you know, because the stakes are so damn high all the time. I need to like take it easy. So the fellowship is going to excite me less. The meetings are going to excite me less. It's true, but I don't need that high in order to get sober. Maybe some people come into meetings and they were so high acting out that they feel like they need to find that high in the meetings. Didn't Roy say, if we're not finding what we were looking for in our acting out, in our sobriety, then we're not going to make it. That's not true. It's true, but it's not the way that he meant it. He meant what we were really looking for in our acting out, but that's not apparent to us for a long time, what we were really, really looking for. It's not apparent at all. We think when we come in that we were looking for the connection that had the magic and the chemistry, and we try to find the chemistry and the love. No, most of us were just trying to find the acceptance. And we can handle the love, but we can't handle the acceptance. You know, oh, me as I really am? Who? You know? No, you know? Just coming closer and closer to that, to me, is like CPR. It's the best. By the way, something you said reminded me of a funny meme somebody sent around here, was always be yourself, except if you're a schmuck, then be somebody else. You know, but I tell that to a lot of people. You're a good guy. And yeah, I think good's a great word.
Well, how would I check in? Would I check in? I have 5 days, or would I check in just I'm sober today?
I check in with my name, what I do when I act out, and if yeah, I think it's nice to check in with, you know, the last time that I acted out, or my sobriety date. I think it's nice. I don't know. That's the thing between a person and their sponsor. There are times when my sponsor advised me not to check in with my sobriety date for various reasons. There's one guy I got off the phone with just yesterday. I said to him, the first thing you need to do, please, is stop checking in with your sobriety date for 6 months. You know, you can tell your sponsor, you can tell some friends, just don't check in with your sobriety date anywhere for 6 months, you know, because it was toxic for him. Everybody's different. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dove. Appreciate it, and thank you everyone for being here. That was beautiful, and congratulations, Dove. I agree with what one of the previous people said on behalf of everyone. The time that you do spend, it's not all just on newcomers, and you are incredibly accessible. So thank you for making all those lewd phone calls back in the day. Now we get to use you for sober phone calls.
That's what it's all about. Yeah. Dirty phone calls.
Is there anyone on the line? Maybe Dove can do it. Dove, do you have a copy of the 12 Promises maybe that you could read, or somebody else have it? Could read it as to close this meeting out? If you have a big book, it's on the bottom of page 83.
I got it.
Okay, if you could read that on the bottom of page 83, and then Dove, you can take us out with a prayer. Thank you. I'm going to mute.
If we are thinking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises?
We think not.
They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them.
One of the things that I don't do when I'm on a Zoom conference is I don't scroll through because I have a cell phone. And the first time I did a Zoom thing, I scrolled through, and then I found out from people that, I always scroll through. Everybody scrolls through. And for me, it's not, it's like voyeurism, because I'm looking at you and you don't know that I'm seeing you. And it's not healthy for me. So I never know who's on here. And it's another thing to surrender, but thank you, whoever's here. Thank you for being part of my recovery. The third step prayer of the big book is, my God, I offer myself to thee to build with me.
I will do with me and
I will.
Give me of the bondage.
Give me of the bondage to self, that I may better do thy will. Please take away my difficulties, so that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of your love, of your power, your love, and your way of living. May I do thy will always.